Well, let's now bring you an issue which we've discussed over the past couple of days regarding the plan of the NGF to access pension funds in Nigeria. So we've heard from the Nigeria Governors Forum, we've heard from SERAP, which is asking the president to stop these proposals by the Nigeria Governors Forum. But if you take a look at that communique that was released after that meeting by the Nigeria Governors Forum, one agency of governments that was mentioned is the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. So it's only fair to hear from the NSIA this evening. And we have joining us on the program, Mr. Uche Oji, who is the MD CEO of Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. I'm sure you've been following the conversation from NEC. I mean, this proposal began at NEC, and Governor El-Rufai was appointed to lead the committee to look into that proposal. And then NGF had a meeting, and this came up again at that meeting. In fact, part of the communique mentioned your agency. And of course, SERAP responded saying that it is unconstitutional, it is against the Pension Reform Act and all. So let me begin by asking you, so if SERAP says this is unconstitutional, talking about that proposal to access 2 trillion naira from pension funds, is there anything wrong from your perspective with the NGF's proposal?
I think there's all sorts of misunderstanding of what the proposal really is. And I speak to that only because this is a conversation that started November last year when the NSIA presented the Governors Forum. And a committee was set up to explore how to make it easy for pension funds to invest. And I think it's key to understand the operative word here. It's an investment opportunity being presented to pension funds, as opposed to a statement that may connote a grab of the pension funds. That's just wrong. It's not correct. And that committee actually had the DG of PENCOM as a member of that committee. So NSIA was asked to join the committee, the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, the DG of PENCOM, everybody was in the committee. So that's the first point you need to understand. The second point was, how do we make it possible? Now, all over the world, pension funds invest in infrastructure. And the reason is very simple. Infrastructure projects have long periods of operating, and if structured properly, they provide you a stable source of cash flow. This is something that should be interesting to pension fund managers. And so it's about looking at viable projects, structuring them in a manner that makes it investable, and inviting the pension funds to look at it and decide whether to invest in it or not. At a certain point in the conversations, the pension fund administrators, one of their representatives, joined that meeting to see how we can structure these projects in a manner that makes it easy for investment, to put for the NSIA and for pension funds. It is not abnormal. The whole world, this is how it works. Pension funds invest in infrastructure only if they're economically viable and work, and it is at their option, to be honest.
Well, we'll talk about
now, the number about 2 trillion naira, how it came up, was purely because the pension funds were asked, what is their strategic investment objective? How much can they go? And at that point, I think there were about 10 trillion naira, and they said it could go 20%. But the truth about it is, if we don't have viable projects that can absorb 20% of their funds, they will not invest in it. Don't forget, pension funds don't belong to anybody. Pension funds belong to people. They don't belong to government. These are people's funds. So your fund manager will take a decision to invest in it. So when a pension fund manager looks at its asset allocation, it includes infrastructure, it includes fixed income instruments, it might actually include a bit of equities. Those are the mandates of a pension fund administrator. So I think it's important that it is clarified and people understand. And this is how the NSIA got involved in the first place.
Well, thank you for giving that background. But looking at what SERAP, the open letter which SERAP wrote to the president, they specifically said that this is unconstitutional and a breach of the Pension Reform Act. Well, you say that this is normal practice. So what part of that act empowers NSIA, the PFAs, to use pension funds in such manner?
No. See, again, back to the word use. pension fund administrators have the money. Listen, these are your pensions, my pensions at the same time, right? So I expect the pension fund manager to invest and earn revenue such that when I retire, there is a stable source of income for me. So these are the things that pension funds will look at before they make an investment. So I am not even entirely privy to what SERAP wrote. I haven't seen it. But you invited me to speak to the role of the NSIA in this, and I said this is something that was designed. Now let me speak to you about what makes an infrastructure project viable. And part of it is because over time we have not actually focused on infrastructure in a manner that looks at the economic viability of projects. One of the projects that NSIA is involved in and is investing in is Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, an incredibly economically viable project. You're talking about a high traffic road, about 100,000 vehicles a day that will be tolled. You're looking at a road where the right of way that's available to the concessionaire is 45 meters on either side of the median, with all the economic benefits of that, from right of way for those that want to run gas pipelines, telecom lines, power cables, businesses on that road, concessions, trailer parks. These are things that are economic opportunities for a road like that. The NSIA is looking to invest in it. Pension funds, if it's possible, should also invest in it. So I'm not sure where the lines crossed, but the reality is what we were looking at, and for the reason why we were involved in it, was in looking at how you turn infrastructure projects into economically viable investments that pension funds themselves will actually want to be part of. And I mentioned to you that at the time when this was being discussed, and it hasn't actually become operational because these are still being discussed and haven't really taken off
Mr.
yet.
Orji, if you could hold on for a minute. So let's rejoin Mr. Uche Orji, specifically now about, the provisions in the Pension Reform Act. Now, Section 86, 85 talks specifically about guidelines in using pension funds, says that, subject to guidelines issued by the Commission, funds and assets shall be invested in bonds, bills, and other securities or guaranteed by the federal government and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Like I said, SERAP says this is against the Pension Reform Act. But looking through this act, under what provision does that infrastructure fund fall into?
Bonds, simply. Bonds, and if it's a federal government road, the structuring will be such that the road will be guaranteed. The income will be guaranteed, okay? Look, the same investment policy statements that guide pension funds in some ways also guides the NSIA. The NSIA is not, this is not about just building a road. The road will be a company, like a special purpose vehicle. Let's take example that the road I keep talking about, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Once the concession process is completed, there'll be a Lagos-Ibadan Expressway company that issues bonds that we will all invest in. Okay, the NSIA will invest. If the terms are all right for the pension funds, they too will invest. Okay, so once they invest, then it's now about what's the security package around the bond issuance. Is that security package a government guarantee, a state government guarantee, or federal government guarantee? Those are all decisions that we as asset managers and the pension funds as fund managers will make. I think there's just a complete misunderstanding of what this program is. The road company will issue a bond, which, by the way, is done everywhere in the world. And the pension fund manager will decide whether the returns, the risk, and the security package around it makes sense. Then they'll make the investment. So don't misconceive this to be a raiding of the pension funds and using it to build roads. These are commercially viable entities, and it's only if they're commercially viable will the NSIA invest in it. The NSIA, by its own act, has the Nigerian Infrastructure Fund, is expected to also make returns. So these are projects that bonds you're investing in, issued by the project companies, and you will only invest if the terms work for you. And those terms include the returns, the tenure, the security package around it, i.e. the guarantees around the income you're about to make. And then you have the option to invest. So if essentially, you look at the Pension Reform Act, or the Pension Act that you've just quoted, right, I think it fits properly. And if the if the road company also has an equity option, and NSI chooses to take up some of the equity, why not?
So now, essentially, this is not a loan.
Profitable. Some roads are profitable, some roads are not profitable.
Right. So essentially, this is not a loan. Pardon me, I just need to clear this. So essentially, this is not a loan, it is a bond.
Of course.
Okay.
It's a bond instrument. So each of these project companies will issue bonds. Will issue bonds. And
Well, you
then,
understand...
again, it depends on whether the terms are right, and then you can invest in it.
Right, you understand the concern of a lot of Nigerians. I mean, you may have seen that analysis on the state of states that says that, you know, over 10 states are technically insolvent. They are unable to fund their recurrent expenditure obligations together with their loan repayment schedules due in 2019, rather, with their respective total revenue. So that's the state of states. And now states taking up this, a lot of people are concerned. Is there any form of, you know, stopgap, fail-safe measure to ensure that we don't get in trouble with this proposal?
There will be. Listen, the NSIA will not invest if the terms do not work. Okay? Like I said, it's not every project that will make it. Some projects will be viable, some will not be. Again, I keep going back to an example which we all relate to, and this is the one that, you know, it keeps coming to my mind, the Lagos to Ibadan Expressway. And also beyond that, the NSIA is investing in the Abuja to Kano Highway. We're also investing in the second Niger Bridge. Each of these projects have their economic drivers, okay? Along that corridor, at the moment, the challenge we have with infrastructure in Nigeria is that we have never really been able to truly monetize infrastructure properly, all right? A road is not just a road, it's an economic corridor, right? We used to toll these roads, then we stopped. We need to go back to that. We used to actually make sure that the concessions are run properly. Who collects the income of that? It belongs to the road.
Right.
So there's a mentality change that needs to happen, and that is actually looking at this as economically viable opportunities. We have just allowed some assets to waste, and that doesn't make any sense. Look
Just
at our
two
rails,
issues.
right? The Western line from Lagos to Kaduna to Kano, there are parts of it that are not great, but if you fix it up, you can actually turn that to a proper economic project that people can not just, you know, pay fare for the rail,
right,
move a lot of cargo on it, but also build warehouses along the economic corridor. So you need to look at infrastructure as an economic investment. That, I think, is the mentality change that needs to happen.
Two
and
issues.
Then you look at some of these roads and say, these ones will work.
Right.
Please.
Pardon me. I mean, two issues before we wind down, because there are a lot of issues to take up with you. So it would appear as though prior to this point, pension funds have been invested in Nigerian infrastructure funds, right?
Well, I haven't seen the bonds that they have actually invested in, but I suppose there's been some Sukuk funds that were issued. I'm not sure whether pension funds invested in those, but if you look at the Sukuk funds, bonds that were raised and used to develop roads, and I don't know, I don't run a pension fund, so I don't know if they invested in it. If they invested in it, that's an investable opportunity. So I wouldn't say they have not, or they have. I don't run a PFI, I run the NSIA, but the NSIA is looking to invest in these things. And in designing some of these projects, the Pension Commission sent a representative who sat through the entire deliberation. And I think that's important to understand. So when it's come across, there are some roads, okay, I'll give an example, Benin to Warri Road, for 8,000 vehicles a day. You know, from what I have been told, I could be wrong, I don't know the exact number. Sorry, that's Abuja Kano. Benin Warri Road, there's a traffic count being done, but I've been told it looks like something that would be viable. Maybe that will work. We're looking at Abuja to Lokoja, connecting the Lagos-Ibadan way. Again, something that the traffic count seems to, I mean, I did a drive across there this morning myself just to check what the traffic count looks like. These are things that we are actually going to be looking at.
Well, because the reason I ask about, using pension funds specifically is because I recall that plan in 2017 to have, you know, the NSWF, that's the Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund, setting up a company, recall with that London-based local currency guarantee firm, to establish or to enable pension funds to be invested in infrastructure funds, which is why I ask. But as we round off on this topic, the chairman of Nigeria Governors Forum spoke on an irrevocable payment order. What does that mean?
Sure. So, again, there are quite a number of things. Irrevocable standing payment order is an order that's issued by, if it's a project in a state, the state will then be backed by a standing payment order. That is your security package. It means that every month the state will make a certain amount of payment into the project company. So projects that are within states and the state's irrevocable standing payment order is viable and people believe in it, then we will do those roads. So most states will benefit from this, those who are viable.
Right.
Where the ISPOs, as they're called, are actually things that we, and before an ISP is issued, the Debt Management Office signs off on it, the Ministry of Finance signs off on it, which means by the time it's coming to the point of investors coming into it, all all boxes are ticked.
Well, clearly,
so the pension funds themselves will invest in it. There's a road. So we set up a company called InfraCredit.
You know, clearly
InfraCredit,
the
which is
devil is in the
talking
details
about,
of
was set
this
up with
one.
Aramco.
I said clearly the devil is in the details,
Well,
and
of
at least
course,
you have
like
shed
every
some light
like
into
every investment,
this.
which is why I think the reaction needs to wait first. The reaction needs to wait first and get all the details first.
Well, at least we have
people,
some information.
react. And again, like I said, we're an investor in it.
Yeah, right. Well, we have to run now, but we have to thank you so much, Mr. Uche Orji, the MD CEO of NSIA, for at least shedding some light on this proposal by the NGF. But definitely the conversation is not over. Thank you for your time.